I'm something of an R.A. Salvatore fan. If you couldn't have realized, I have almost every single one of these that he's ever made, from here to the very finale. Salvatore has been around since the late 80s, and even before that, before he started writing these stories, which began with the Crystal Shard into the Halfling's Gem for his very first trilogy, and this previous trilogy that you just saw on the screen was the prequel trilogy. That is technically a prequel, but now that it's been out for so long, the Dark Elf trilogy, as it were, is considered the book one of the tale, and now the Crystal Shard, which came out later, which came out first actually, is considered the fourth in this series. And honestly, I would recommend, if you go into this series, that you read Homeland, Into Exile, and then Sojourn. I do recommend that you read those three first to give you an idea of these characters before getting into this. It will help you appreciate things a little bit more. And, of course, we also have the amazing Cleric Quintet. I usually call it the Clerics Quintet, usually. I have the Collector's Edition here, which I do recommend you pick up if you want to read this series. Though most people read the Kindle Edition, that's not a problem at all. If you want to read the Kindle Edition or listen to the audiobook, that's fine, that's your thing. These are 5 books, the Clerics Quintet. It contains within it, we have Canticle, Sylvan Shadows, Night Masks, The Fallen Fortress, and the Chaos Curse. Never you mind these writings. These were in here when I picked this up. I picked it up used, of course, because when you want to buy a new version of the Cleric Quintet, it might be a little expensive. I picked this up a long time ago though, so this was like $15 when I picked it up used. Nowadays, it might be a little bit more. It might be around the same price. I haven't checked, but it is a delightful edition. The words are packed into the screen to really condense and put as much as they can onto the page to fit 5 books worth in here. Now, while we have the Drizzt series, as they literally call it, where does it show it? Here. They literally call it the Legend of Drizzt here. This is not a Drizzt storyline. This is the Cleric Quintet containing the character of Catterly Bonaduce, who is a cleric character. He's a sort of pacifist, lawful, neutral good. I think he's neutral good. Type of character that is basically a pacifist type of character. He grows. This is where he starts the earliest days of his life, the earlier days of his life before we meet him in the actual Legend of Drizzt. This isn't the novel where you meet him, but you meet him in the Legend of Drizzt later on. But these are his days, his adventures, before you meet him in the actual Legend of Drizzt. And there's 5 of these novels, and normally I would say you should read all 5 of these after you finish the Crystal Shard / Icewind Dale trilogy. That would be the first 6 novels that I just showed you on the screen. Then you reach into the Cleric Quintet, and it is an excellent little story. It introduces 2 of the most enduring characters of his that he has been using ever since here all the way to the latest novel that he has written, aka Lolth's Warrior. He's been using 2 of these characters, namely Ivan Boulder Shoulder. One of them is right here, and of course the lovable Pickle Boulder Shoulder, who is hanging off the edge of the dragon. He is a most peculiar dwarf. He considers himself a druid, or as he would like to call himself, a doodad. D-O-O-D-A-D, a doodad, because Pickle doesn't exactly speak in normal wordingness. He uses various types of audible shrieks and lispy wordisms. When Ivan calls Pickle his brother, Pickle would often chime in saying, "Me brother," aka B-R-U-D-D-E-R, "me brother." And Pickle would always shout this whenever Ivan says, "me brother." Pickle does it as a sort of game. He knows exactly what he's doing, and he's a delightful character. Pickle is never sad. He is never sad. He is always a happy character. And it is a delight to see this character on the page whenever he shows up. His antics with his brother Ivan are a delight in this 5-book series here. And to see them come in later in the storyline in the Drizzt series is also a delight. And then the final character here is Danica Maupassant. She is a monk character, later the wife of Catelli Bonadus. And she, I believe, is lawful good type of character, while Ivan and Pickle, Ivan is more neutral / lawful good. Pickle is pure neutral. He's not neutral good. He's just neutral, pure neutral. And Catelli is a neutral good type of character. It's a delightful little. It's a delightful little group. They go around. They do what they can. They deal with a bunch of orcs, goblins, gnolls, dragon, the vampire. It's a delightful little story that teaches you learn about the group of characters. I don't want to spoil too much here about the Clerics Quintet, more because I don't remember a lot of this. I read the Clerics Quintet back in high school. But yeah, overall, I liked the Clerics Quintet. Up next, we have this little trilogy, though it's technically a quadrilogy, though we'll talk about this one in a moment. This is the next answer to the Icewind Dale trilogy. And we have the Drow of Menzoberranzan coming back into the picture after the Icewind Dale trilogy, since the Drow of Menzoberranzan were introduced in the prequel series, which is technically the first 3 books of Drizzt's origins, the character of Drizzt and all that. And that would be a little break once we get to the Icewind Dale, and then they have come back to get after the heretic Drow that escaped the Lothian little area and all that stuff. And then after these 3, there are some books by Salvatore and his son Gino called the Stone of Tymora trilogy. They're more of a young adult type of trilogy, so less more like big book type of thing. Less that and more young adult type of setting. Like the text is a little bigger, the book might be a little smaller, the language and all that stuff might be a little bit less adult and more for young adults, teenagers and stuff like that. The Stone of Tymora is a little bit different, but it's technically canon to this series, because after these 3 books, Drizzt and Catti leave to sail the high seas with Captain Dudermont and do some pirate hunting stuff, and then they get involved in the Stone of Tymora stuff. And after that, Drizzt and Catti return to Mithril Hall, and then we get this story here where the companions have reunited, and they do their thing, and they close out this tale for now. At least this one, the Retribution of the Trilogy of the Drow and all that stuff, that's done. And then the next 6 novels are technically 2 separate trilogies, though I consider it one big story, technically, and it begins with The Silent Blade. The Silent Blade is technically 2 storylines, one involving Drizzt, and one involving the assassin known as Artemis Entreri. Artemis Entreri was Drizzt's nemesis in the previous 2 segments. He was the big bad guy in the Icewind Dale trilogy, and then he came back to get revenge in the next quadrilogy that I just showed you after that. So now he's back once again, but now he's not necessarily as interested in chasing after his nemesis, and he is returning home, only to get wrapped back up in a confrontation with Drizzt, more as a cathartic little victory to get Shuri to move on mentally. And then he gets involved with Jarlaxle, which is a character who was introduced in the second book, Exile. And he's a very interesting character. We'll be doing some various character studies videos throughout this little Drizzt series. This is just my introductionally video, so to speak, so I'm not going to go too into detail. But this is the branching point that splits Drizzt and his companions up. The companions of the Hall split up after this, and they go their separate ways. Not all of them, just some of them do. And Shuri goes on his own little adventure, and Shuri and Jarlaxle team up and do their little adventure, because the companion book to the Silent Blade is Servant of the Shard. The Servant of the Shard is technically part of the Sellswords trilogy. However, it takes place right after the Silent Blade and before the subsequent two novels, and then the next two in the trilogy of the Sellswords trilogy happens after the conclusion of the original 13. So these two are basically two halves of the same book. Because immediately after this happens. Immediately. And then we get to read about the Servant of the Shard and all that good stuff. These two are probably my favorite in the earlier areas pre-Ghost King. This part of the story, especially the character of Artemis and Shuri, is very, very well done. The character development for this character is excellent. I cannot praise Salvatore enough for where he takes this character from just a simple mustache-twirling villain to a very deep and flawed anti-hero type of character, and especially the complex character of Jarlaxle and where he stands, though technically you get the feeling that Jarlaxle may just be a good guy in disguise as a bad guy ever since his very first introduction, but he's just not as brave and bold enough to be like Drizzt, because if he ever did openly become like Drizzt, he would basically lose everything that he's worked so hard to achieve within and without the Society of Menzo and all that stuff. But you can see a kindred spirit going on here, but he also sees a kindred spirit in Shuri. So he's trying to fix both of them, basically. And it's excellent. It is an excellent little companion piece after that. And then, after these two, we get the novel of The Spine of the World. Now, Spine of the World is, unlike the Servant of the Shard book, it is separating the companions of the Hall. The Drizzt is not here. Regis is not here. Catti-brie is not here. Bruenor is not here. This is Wulfgar's standalone story, pretty much. This whole thing is Wulfgar's book. And we don't get another one like this. We don't get another standalone novel. Bruenor doesn't even get a standalone novel. Drizzt, Bruenor, Regis, or Catti-brie, neither of those three of the companions of the Hall gets a standalone novel. That's crazy to think that Wulfgar deserved a standalone story. But it's excellent. It is an excellent little character piece, giving Wulfgar some much-needed character development after his disappearance and his time in Ertu's dungeon and all that stuff. You'll learn who Ertu is in the Icewind Dale trilogy. But Wulfgar's development is amazing here. He's gone from big bad guy to hero to anti-hero, and then he goes back to being a hero. It's excellent. It really is. Because after his development in this story, we close out the original 13 Drizzt novels with Sea of Swords. This is basically like a concluding tale of the old. The old as in the original 13 novels of the Legend of Drizzt. There's a sort of sense of finality here of the old ways, of the old days, of the old era. And after this, it gets pretty wild. But first, we get to have a little bit of a detour before we get to see our beloved Dark Elf Drizzt again. Because we have the next two of the Sellswords trilogy. Next, we have Promise of the Witch King and Road of the Patriarch. Jarlaxle and Intriri have left Faerun and moved off into Damara and the Bloodstone Lands. The Bloodstone Lands and most of these characters that you get to see and hear, King Gareth Dragonsbane, Grandmaster Kain, and all those characters, they were released in other previous works that Salvatore created as campaign settings. The Bloodstone Lands is a campaign settings that Salvatore made, and he made a bunch of NPCs and other types of stuff. He modeled the character of Kain and the Monastery of the Yellow Rose. That's why we get to see Kain and a lot of stuff regarding that character in this and subsequent novels. And I'm not sure if he created Gareth Dragonsbane as well. Gareth Dragonsbane is a very popular player character option, archetype to use and model off of for various campaign settings of the Bloodstone Lands, the Bloodstone Wars, and all that stuff. I don't play tabletop, so I don't know anything more than what I just researched. So I don't know how big of an impact Salvatore had on all of these NPCs and campaign settings and all that stuff, but he did contribute to it, which is why a lot of these characters show up in this. This is like an homage to the Bloodstone Lands and those characters that he created, and kind of like a sequel to those stuff that he did way back in the day, because they're back and they're older now. They're much older than they used to be. Their adventuring days are all over. King Gareth Dragonsbane is now the king. He just sits on a throne all day being a king and all that stuff, and these two have come to mess things up. Intriri has moved on from villain to full-on anti-hero. Jarlaxle's already been an anti-hero. He has basically put his whole thing in Menzoberranzan on hold and left the ruling of his mercenary group of Bregan de Aerth to Camuriel Obladra, who has become his co-leader in the group, so that he could just spend some time running around with Intriri, because Intriri's character study seems to be Jarlaxle's next motivation, his next plan of adventure and all this stuff. And you also get to see in the character of Jarlaxle that he basically wishes he got to be like Drizzt and just adventure on the surface and escape the humdrum blah of Menzoberranzan. So he's getting to have some adventures as well, and it's an excellent little bonding moment for the two characters, but also character studies are going on as well as a sequel to the Bloodstone Lands and those characters. We bring back Grandmaster Kain, we bring back King Gareth Dragonsbane. It's just an excellent time all around for these two. So if you like the character of Artemis Intriri, if you like the character of Jarlaxle, then don't skip the Sellswords trilogy. Don't just go from Sea of Swords into the Hunter's Blades. Read these two and and Servant of the Shard as well before you get into the next bit where we get to see Drizzt again. And we see him here in the Hunter's Blades trilogy. Now you see here a collector's edition like the Cleric's Quintet. This is the collector's edition of the Hunter's Blades trilogy. This is 3 books in one beloved hard copy, hardback sets. Everything, all the book, the whole story is condensed in these pages. The paper is really, really fancy feeling. It was really well made. I believe this was discontinued, so you won't be able to get a copy new. But I bought my copy used for pretty cheap, I think for about $20. And it came to me in practically brand new condition. This slight rip happened after I picked it up, probably from storage and pulling it out of storage or just overall use. I only read this once. I do plan to do a full reread of the Drizzt series because my memories of the things prior to the Ghost King are kind of blurry, and I do want to come back and re-experience this and with knowledge of the latter half of the series and the character growth of those characters and the things that they already knew back in the day to see how they retroactively work, and see if how much of a genius Salvatore actually is in retroactively modifying his characters and all that stuff and all this stuff, to see if he actually planned to do this for the blah 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 blah. But so far, I have full confidence in him. He is incredible. The way he does his fight scenes gives you enough detail to use your imagination to fill in the gaps of his combat dialogue. The combat description, rather. The dialogue, though, character talkingness, the dialogue is amazing. The dialogue, excuse me, ever since the very first novel all the way to the very last novel, dialogue was one of the things I gravitated to this series for. Dialogue and characters. The building of character has always been one of my fascinations when I read series franchise type things, because you get to stay with characters and see how they learn and grow beyond just a single novel, like a bunch of standalone stories. You get to actually see Drizzt's journey over 40 novels. He goes from a hopeful hero into a jaded hero. Here he is in the middle of the war against the Kingdom of Many Arrows, and he and Brunor, they have to tackle their racism and their whole viewpoint towards the various races and characters that they viewed as evil. Drizzt had hope because he's a drow, a race that most people believe to be 100% evil, yet here he is clearly not evil. He has hope for the other races, like the orcs and the goblins and the bugbears and all that other stuff. He has hope for them and in believing that they can't all be bad guys. Because he met a goblin once called Nojheim, Nojheim, hopefully I pronounced that correctly, Nojheim. The goblin was a good guy, he was nice, he was kind, and he had the hope that not all goblins were just typical bad guys in an RPG. Because Dungeons & Dragons is the RPG and all that stuff. You have to have bad guys to beat. But now these stories are giving you perspectives on these typical bad guys and making you think. What if you put yourself on the other guy's shoes? What if you put yourself into the enemy's shoes and see how the enemy is and what the enemy's motivations are, and make the enemy's people and give them motivation? During the whole Hunter's Blades trilogy, you get the feeling that both sides of the war have a reason to exist. The Kingdom of Many Arrows, the orcs, the king is a Buld, and a Buld was blessed by their god, Grumish, to be like the avatar of war. His intelligence was heightened, and once his intelligence heightened, so did his morality. And you get the feeling that a Buld just wants the right to have a kingdom and have a say in the world of the civilized society. He wants to reform the orcs. He wants to make the orcs into more respectable people, so that the other races of the surface don't just view them with racism and just kill them as soon as they see them. He wants to reform his species, and he's very good, well written in this trilogy. I definitely recommend reading the Hunter's Blades trilogy. It is an excellent character study into racism and redemption of a species, and hoping that you're not alone in being like the only good guy of your race. It is very, very good. Up next, we have the Transitions trilogy after the Hunter's Blades trilogy. And things go from bad to worse for our characters in here. That's hence the transitions. This is moving Drizzt away from the first half of the series and into a much darker second half of the world as he tries to forge his path. This is basically losing the companions of the Hall. In the Orc King, it's basically the conclusion of the Hunter's Blades trilogy and the resolution of the battle versus the Orc Kingdom of Many Arrows, and making a peace treaty with the dwarves and all of that stuff. In The Pirate King, we have to say goodbye to Captain Deutermont. So if you're a big fan of the Stone of Timora trilogy, and you really fell in love with the character of Captain Deutermont, we're saying goodbye to him here. He dies, and Jarlaxle ends up taking over control of the city of Luskan. Originally for profit, basically, but we'll eventually learn that Jarlaxle actually has hope for the city to redeem it from piracy, because Luskan was a city of pirates, and Captain Deutermont tried to liberate Luskan from piracy, and now Jarlaxle is trying to reform the pirates. And that is an interesting little thing here, how you view. And there's another thing that Salvatore is amazing at when it comes to character alignments. We have Captain Deutermont, who is a lawful good person, but the lawful good people also hold racial biases, and also various biases towards alignments in general. If you use the evil alignments as bad guys, and good guys have a duty to defeat the bad guys. Whereas Jarlaxle is more in the middle. He's more of a neutral character, and he says, why do we have to just destroy the bad guys? Why can't we reform them? Why can't we use them? Why can't we use their skills, their abilities, and their wealth and put it to a better use instead of evil use? Deutermont just wants to beat the pirates. Jarlaxle wants to use the pirates and make them better people for it. Make them want to be better people. And that is amazing. That is an amazing character study in both of those characters. So we say goodbye to Captain Deutermont, and Jarlaxle begins his work in trying to heal the city of Luskan. It's amazing. But then, oh my goodness, the Ghost King is probably one of my favorite novels. This is a culmination of the Sellswords trilogy, so if you haven't read the Sellswords trilogy, you need to. It is bringing in elements from the Sellswords trilogy. It is bringing in elements from the Icewind Dale trilogy. It is bringing back the Crystal Shard. It is a culmination of everything. It is bringing in the clerics from the Cleric Quintet, the Catterley character. It's bringing everything in. This is the finale of the first half of the series. Everybody's here, and a lot of people die. Catti-brie is gone. Wulfgar has left the team at this point. Regis dies. Catterley is gone. And Danica goes off to be alone. Ivan and Pickleball, the shoulder, will survive. Then they go off to do their own thing. But a lot of characters that you spent the first half of this series getting to know, getting to really care about, they're gone. The only ones left are Drizzt and Bruenor. And they're off on one final adventure. The Dwarf King wants to find the kingdom of Gauntlegrim. And he does. The Gauntlegrim book is the opening of the Neverwinter quadrilogy, 4 books. I have 3 in mass market paperback and 1 in a hardback. So I'll just show the 3 paperbacks first, and then we'll go into the 4th one later. But the reason why it was called a Transitions trilogy is because we open in Gauntlegrim roughly 100 years after the first half of the series. This has been 100 years. Most of the human characters that you've met, they are gone. They have died of old age. Wulfgar was the only companion of the Hall to not be killed, but he has left the group. He's gone to go back to his tribe to live in Icewind Dale or whatever. He has lived to the ripe old age of about 100 or so years, and he has died of old age. He's gone. Most of the human characters you think are gone. The only one that comes back, interestingly enough, is a certain assassin that Drizzt may actually be very happy to see. In Gauntlegrim, Drizzt and Bruenor try to rediscover the ancient lost city of the Delzun dwarves, and they find it. But Bruenor loses his life, and he wants Drizzt to carry on the name, and says, his final words were like, "I found it, elf. Tell them I found it." And then he dies. And it's sad, but hopeful. Drizzt is now alone. All the companions of the Hall have either died or died of old age. He's now by himself with Dahlia Sinfel, who's going to be part of the team for the next 4 novels. And we're going to eventually basically get the team of the Companions of the Hall Dark mode. You know, with Justice League and Justice League Dark, how we get a team of darker characters instead of our big heroes of the DC with Superman and all that stuff. We get darker characters. Well, this is the Companions of the Hall dark mode. Brings in Dahlia, who's basically a very dark character. She's very neutralish. She's not a goody two-shoes type of character. She's very much about vengeance. And Drizzt is very much going from a hero into an anti-hero mode. Jarlaxle comes back and sees this and chides Drizzt in his newfound darkness, and Drizzt lashes back out and says, "Why do you keep following me everywhere? Why are you so interested in me?" And Jarlaxle just basically shouts the truth at Drizzt and says, "Because you are the one who escaped." Drizzt is the one who escaped, not just Menzo Berenzon. He escaped Lolth herself. She has no hold on him at all. Drizzt has no worries about her. He doesn't fear her at all. Most of the Drow fear Lolth. Many revere her, but most fear her. Drizzt escaped. He escaped not just Lolth. He escaped the idea of Lolth. He escaped fear of her. That is a beautiful thing, and that is why Jarlaxle looks up to him so much. And Drizzt seems to have lost his way, so to speak. And into the next story called Neverwinter by itself, which probably is the story prelude to the highly anticipated Neverwinter MMO. The Neverwinter 4 books quadrilogy is really, really good. Drizzt meets up with Intruri again. Artemis Intruri is alive after 100 years. How is this human still alive? Well, there is a sort of anthology book, a series of short stories which has been discontinued, which is why copies of the book are very expensive. So I don't have this copy, but I do know of the short story between Jarlaxle and Artemis Intruri that explains why Intruri is still alive at this point in the story 100 years later. Basically, Artemis Intruri's dagger, a vampiric jeweled dagger, which is capable of stealing the life force, the essence of the people he kills. He has basically absorbed the essence of a Shade / Shadowvar type of character, and basically through timey-wimey whatever, Artemis Intruri now has the lifespan typical of that of an elf. So he's going to live for about as long as an elf does, according to what the anthology book says. So that's why he's still alive. And Artemis Intruri, through the sword that he collected in the Sellswords trilogy, Charon's Claw, has become enslaved to the sword. And there is a tyrant who rules the city of Neverwinter called Herzgo Alegni, who also is a character that Dahlia wants revenge against. So Drizzt, Dahlia, and Artemis Intruri team up to get revenge against Herzgo Alegni. And during this time, they recruit 2 more characters to their team. Brother Afafrenfir, who is a monk character who has lost his way. And then there's Ambergris Omal of the Adbar Omals. Amber is a dwarf who got exiled from Citadel Adbar, but she's still a nice guy. She's still a nice character. And she sees Drizzt, and she basically says anyone who knows King Brunor and knows Drizzt and Brunor's friendship with Drizzt, they go like helping him out is basically like helping out King Brunor. So Amber basically turns on her companions who were sent to kill Drizzt and spares Brother Afafrenfir because he thinks he is a good guy out of all the other guys that they've teamed up with and wants to reform him. So Drizzt has teamed up with Dahlia, Artemis Intruri, Ambergris Omal of the Adbar Omals, and Brother Afafrenfir to fight and defeat Herzgo Alegni, and they finally do it. Leading into the 4th and final book of the Neverwinter saga, The Last Threshold. This is when Drizzt gets entangled with the Shade Empire, the Shade Enclave, the Shadowvar Empire. Lich Elix and all that stuff, beating up Perzgolegni and getting involved with Thay and Saz Tam and all that stuff gets Drizzt in a bad position. And Jarlaxle learns of Drizzt's predicament, and he's like, look, I gotta get my friend out of here. So he goes to rescue Drizzt, and sure, he teams up with Jarlaxle to rescue Drizzt, and Drizzt and his team of dark dudes go off about their own adventure for a while, eventually ending in Drizzt wanting to return to Calvin's cairn, where everything began, because he has nowhere else to go. He keeps talking about how he misses his companions, and Dahlia Sinfel gets angry about this and goes like, why do you keep trying to be the goody two-shoes? We're bad guys, we're neutral people. But Drizzt's heart is just not in it anymore. He's not a bad guy, he's not an anti-hero. He has lost his way, and he realizes that, and he wants to find his way again. And Dahlia gets angry, she tries to kill him, she mortally wounds him, and Triri, of all people, saves Drizzt. And he says farewell to the Drow Ranger, who he has finally learned to call a friend. Which is amazing character development for the character of Artemis and Triri. The journey of Artemis and Triri in this series there's a reason why Neverwinter Saga is one of my favorites, and it's mostly for the character of Artemis and Triri. They save him from the grip of Karen's claw. He has reclaimed control over the sword, and he's now finding his own way in the world. And Drizzt now needs to find his own way, but he's currently dying atop of Calvin's cairn in Icewind Dale. How is he gonna get out of that? Enter the companions from the Sundering Saga. The Sundering series is where a group of authors all make a novel set during the big event of the Sundering. Now, the Sundering, much like the Ghost King novel, they take place in a big climactic event that switches between the previous edition of D&D into the next edition. So, for example, the Time of Troubles was switching from the 3rd edition into the 4th edition. The Sundering is transitioning from the 4th edition into the 5th edition. So, the Neverwinter Saga was in 4th edition D&D, and the Sundering is going from 4th edition into 5th edition D&D, and we've been in 5th edition all the way to now. And I guess we're due for a 6th edition, I don't know, but the second Sundering was the big event that changed the world and the god space, going from 4th edition into 5th. So that's that. And during the companions, the goddess of Myliki has collected the spirits of Drizzt's dear companions of the Hall. Bruenor Battlehammer, Wulfgar, Regis, and Catti-brie have all been collected in the forest of Aruladun, which is the realm of Myliki, and she has decided to give Drizzt a gift. She has reincarnated the souls of these 4 companions, and they get to live a second life. They don't just get revived, they get reincarnated. Wulfgar gets reincarnated in a barbarian tribe with the memories of his previous life. So does Bruenor, Regis, and Catti-brie. Regis views this as a second chance. Regis is the best character after the companions. After this, of the 4 companions that come back, Regis and Catti-brie are the 2 that are changed the most. Wulfgar and Bruenor are basically the exact same characters that came before. They basically just use their second chance at life to just grow up to be the same person, and they just go back to being the same character previously. But Regis was always the weakest character. He was the weakest link in the previous Companions of the Hall. He was always getting captured, he was always getting saved, and this time he was determined to use his second life wisely to become a better person, to become a stronger person. And he obtains new skills. He's a very, very good rogue/thief type character, and now he's a useful companion. Catti-brie basically learns arcane wizard techniques and clerical magics from Myliki. She becomes a chosen of Myliki. Chosen is the type of character that gets a lot of divine abilities and basically is a favorite person of that deity. So Cadbury becomes a chosen of Maliki. Bruno Battlehammer is the exact same character as before. He just grows up to pick up his stuff from Gauntlegrim from his grave. He goes to Gauntlegrim, digs up his grave, and takes his old armor, takes his old axe, and becomes the exact same person. Regis tries to become the better person, and Wolfgar just leaves his tribe to go find his friends. He's the same person. He's the one that probably has the least amount of character development, but that's probably because most of his character development happened in his previous life. Wolfgar lived to the ripe old age of his 100s. He lived his life, and he died satisfied. So his second chance in life, he's just gonna have fun. He's just here to have fun. He's not concerned with much of anything about growing. He's done his growing, so now this is just his chance to have some fun. And the four go to Kelvin's cairn at the precise moment, because basically for the past 20 some odd years during the Neverwinter Saga, these companions have been alive. And then they knew at this precise moment that Dahlia was going to betray Drizzt and leave him dying atop Kelvin's cairn, and his old companions has finally come and save him. Enter the companions and the companions codex, basically. I have two of them on paperback and one in hardback. The companions codex, I believe, details the Armgos and the Sorlarans. I'm trying to remember here. Okay, I remember now. This is the Second War of the Silver Marches, basically. The Companions Codex is like a sequel to the Hunter's Blades trilogy. The peace that the dwarves and the Kingdom of Many Arrows have had for so long has finally started to weaken. The orcs and the dwarves are going back to battle. The drow have come to make things worse. And the companions have come back to fix everything up. The dragons show up. I think Kane show up. So Grandmaster Kane, he's still alive too. He's like 200-something years old. He's a long time, but he's a master monk. Yeah, it makes sense why Kane's still around. But this is like the War of the Silver Marches, if I remember correctly. I do need to do a reread this trilogy, but it's really good. Leading into the Homecoming trilogy, Archmage, Maestro, and Hero. This is basically where the next 6 novels to come build off of. Grumpf, Archmage Grumpf, finally comes back into a big center of prominence. If you listen, the title of the book's named after him, basically. So Grumpf does an experimental spell that goes awry, and he inadvertently summons Demogorgon, which is like a demon prince of the demon plane, into Menzoberranzan, causing a lot of trouble. It's like, boohoo, right? They're drow. That's Menzoberranzan, let them rot. But Grumpf leaves Menzoberranzan and goes to the surface world to live in Luskan, and he tries to revive the host tower of the Arcane, because the dwarves now want to push the Zorlarans out of Gauntlegrim. They have the House Zorlaran from Menzoberranzan has tried to take Gauntlegrim for their own house, for a more surfacier city, to have more drow impact on the surface world from Menzoberranzan's point of view and all that crap. And King Brunor's like, oh no, you don't. He goes in and pushes her out, and Grumpf makes a deal with King Brunor to ally Luskan with Brunor's Gauntlegrim, and they get the primordial in the pit. The Gauntlegrim is a big ancient dwarven forge, and sleeping beneath Gauntlegrim is a primordial of fire. The primordial fire is the fire that powers the dwarven forges of this legendary fortress. And this is where you can make enchanted materials. It's basically like an alchemy pot. The primordial forge, you could take 2 enchanted relics, like an enchanted sword of fire and a whip of fire, and you can throw them both into this forge, and it merges the enchantments of both relics into one relic, and that's basically what it is. It's an alchemy pot. But it's a good writing trope, and it's a good story. And there's a reason why the titles of these books are based off of 3 very specific drow: Archmage, Grumpf, the maestro Jarlaxle, and the hero of Drizzt and the Triri, surprisingly. So Drizzt, during this time period, has been basically going through a philosophical problem. Yvonne, who is the daughter of Grumph, was given the memories of Yvonne the Eternal. Yvonne the Eternal ruled Menzoberranzan for like 2,000 years or something, and she was recently killed by King Bruenor Battlehammer. And now she wants to... Yvonne II is in the womb of one of Grumph's consorts, and they decide to implant all of Yvonne's memories because they have Yvonne's head. They preserved it. And an illithid takes all of Yvonne's memories and puts it into the fetus, the growing fetus of the baby of Grumph. Basically making Grumph's child born fully conscious with 2,000 years of experience. And basically, during her first year of life, she's basically acting entirely off of what she believes the world expects of her. And she tries to mess with Drizzt. She tries to mess with all the trials of Menzoberranzan, blah, blah, blah. But the true maestro of this whole series is Jarlaxle, and he has come in to help try to fix everything for his friends and all his stuff. And he gets Drizzt over to the Monastery of the Yellow Rose to learn with Grandmaster Kain to try to fix the mind messery that Yvonne's done to his brain, and try to fix Drizzt with that. And then, after that, we have Hero. This is amazing. This is the amazing, big thing. Zinnia Millarn has shown up. She's done some bad guy stuff. And Jarlaxle has to team up with Artemis and Triri, and Artemis and Triri's lover, Dahlia Sinfell, she's still around. She's been captured by the Drow, and her mind's been messed up by all of the bad guy Drows, Zinnia Millarn, and all that stuff, to do that thing, and Demogorgon's still doing his thing down here. There's a lot of stuff going on, and basically Drizzt has to get his mind fixed, and his mind does eventually get fixed by Kain in the Monastery of the Yellow Rose, and Jarlaxle comes to collect him, and Triri comes to beg Jarlaxle for help in trying to rescue Dahlia from Menzoberranzan. So together, all three of these guys raid Menzoberranzan to rescue Dahlia, to defeat Demogorgon. Yvonne II has a heel face turn and realizes that Drizzt may actually be a focal point of her love and adoration and all that stuff. Yvonne II falls in love with him. I know what you're thinking. She's like 1 year old. How does she do that? Well, she basically uses magic to age herself up to a drow in her mid-20s. And she's now an adult body, and she's fallen in love with Drizzt. And so she makes a plan with Grumph and the Illithids, Jarlaxle. Everybody comes together to make a plan to use Drizzt as a weapon to defeat Demogorgon once and for all. So basically, the Illithid hive mind are going to come together with Camuriel's insistence from Jarlaxle to make a kinetic barrier around Drizzt. And the entirety of Menzoberranzan are going to attack Drizzt with magical attacks. A kinetic barrier basically absorbs attacks. It's kind of like a bide attack from Pokemon. You know, when Pokemon attack your character, they use this bide for a few turns. They absorb damage, and then they deal back damage about twice as powerful as what they absorbed at the enemy. That's basically what a kinetic barrier is. You absorb attacks, and then you dish it out in a single focal point strike. That is basically the combined total of all of the individual strikes that you got that otherwise would not have broken through a barrier or something like that. So basically, Drizzt was attacked by everything, and he had a big kinetic barrier powered by an Illithid hive mind, and he destroys Demogorgon with one strike, and it is great. And Triri is back. He's friends with Drizzt now. They stand side by side. I never would have thought that would have happened. I never would have thought that would have happened. When I read Neverwinter, I never would have thought he would have fought beside Drizzt again. I never would have thought he'd even be alive. His heel face turn, he has come from an anti-hero to a repentant hero. He wants to actually be a good guy now. He's still kind of tsundere about it, but he's become a good guy. Grumph is becoming Grumph is basically like a big softy. We'll get to him in a bit, but Intruria really, really fixed his stuff up. And this is where I left off with Salvatore for a long time, until this year, where I picked up his latest 6 novels that he wrote, the Generations Trilogy and the Way of the Drow Trilogy. We're going to talk about the Generations Trilogy next. Here is the Generations Trilogy, and it's focusing around half of this trilogy is set in the past, because at the end of not this one, this one. At the end of Hero, Ivana II basically has a heel face turn, and she decides to revive Drizzt's father, Zagnavian, who you got to learn about in the very first novel of the series, Homeland. And he's back. After all this time, after like 30 years of writing these books, Zagnavian is back, and his character comes back to life, and Jarlaxle meets him first, and Jarlaxle sheds tears of joy to meet his old friend, and we learn that Jarlaxle was the maestro behind Drizzt's entire life, basically. In the past, Jarlaxle was hired by Matron Malice Duerden to capture a promising weapons master from a house that was about to be attacked by another drow house. And his name was Zagnavian Simfrey. So Jarlaxle procures Zagnavian and delivers him to House Duerden to become Zagnavian Duerden. And this is where Jarlaxle and Zagnavian become friends. Jarlaxle convinces Zagnavian through friendship to join House Duerden, because otherwise things would be a lot worse. Jarlaxle wishes he could have just recruited Zagnavian into Brigand Earth, and he unofficially does become a member of Brigand Earth, because Jarlaxle expects that House Duerden is going to make problems of itself and be destroyed at one point, and that's when Jarlaxle is going to come collect his friend Zagnavian and says, hey, I'll free you from all this stuff after House Duerden messes up. These houses don't last more than a few centuries, so you just have to wait, and then I'll come get you. So Zagnavian gets moved into House Duerden, and he basically fathers Drizzt. But before that happens, Jarlaxle forges a very powerful friendship with Zagnavian. And then he learns that the third-born son of Matron Malice, if it's a son, that son's going to be sacrificed to Lolth, because the third-born son is usually always sacrificed to Lolth. The only reason why Jarlaxle, who is also a third-born son, survives is through the interference of Kuro Audrin, who is a drow psionicist, who I'll talk about that later, I guess. But summarized-wise, Jarlaxle survives because one of his older brothers is killed at the time of his birth. And he basically tries to whisper this into Dinin Duerden, the second-born son, and so does Briza, who is the oldest daughter of House Duerden. She tries to whisper into Dinin's ear to try to kill Nalfine Duerden so that he could be a Meldeboy and so that Drizzt doesn't have to be sacrificed. And so basically Jarlaxle is like the maestro behind bringing Zagnavian into House Duerden, Zagnavian breeding with Matron Malice to bring Drizzt into the world. And then we learn that Jarlaxle is also the reason why Drizzt even survived the next thing. During the Relentless's book here takes place coincidingly around the time of the first book in this series, but from Zagnavian and Jarlaxle's point of view. And we learn that Zagnavian is very proud of his son, but then he gets saddened when he thinks that Drizzt killed an elven child on the surface. And then we learn that Drizzt hid the child and faked the child's death to make sure that the child survived. And they view this as a great heresy against Lolth, and they try to have him sacrificed to Lolth, and Zagnavian is probably also going to be killed as well. And Jarlaxle went to Matron Malice and went to even Matron Banray to try to avert this, to try to whisper into Matron Malice's ear that maybe keeping Drizzt alive and sacrificing only Zagnavian would appease Loth and give Drizzt a chance to repent on the ways and become a better soldier in Loth's army and all that crap. And Major Malice buys it, she eats it up, and she only sacrifices Zaknafian instead of Drizzt. So basically, Jarlaxle saved Drizzt's life before they even met, because he's been friends with Drizzt's father for centuries. And that explains Jarlaxle's actions during the first half of this series, because he's basically been inadvertently keeping Drizzt alive every time that Drizzt got captured. He basically orchestrated Drizzt's escape from Menzoberranzan after he got captured. He basically whispered into Enturi's ear to use Drizzt to help himself escape. And so Enturi and Drizzt escaped Menzoberranzan together through Jarlaxle's orchestrating the events to let that happen without implicating himself, of course. But Jarlaxle has been basically present in Drizzt's entire life, and that it explains why he eventually becomes a friend. So that's the prequel half of the Generations trilogy. The other half is Cyndia Millarn waging war against Gauntlegrim because she wants to kill Drizzt and Jarlaxle and Zaknafian. She wants those three dead. Jarlaxle because he orchestrated a raid on her house. Zaknafian because his being revived is the ultimate heresy against Loth. And then Drizzt because he's just the ultimate heretic in general, and she wants to kill all three of them to appease her goddess Loth and all that stuff. And so Zaknafian comes back to life. He meets with Jarlaxle, he meets his son, he acclimates to the world, and even Yavanna II has one of the biggest redemption arcs in this story, where she helps Drizzt selflessly. She even changes the color of her eyes to be purple like Drizzt. She is hopelessly in love with the character, but she won't step in between Drizzt and Catti-brie. She won't do that. But she also realizes that Catti-brie is a human, so hey, maybe about after another 100 years, hey, maybe then. So she's a great character. Yavanna II is like probably one of my top 5 favorite characters. Top 5. She helps Drizzt out. Zaknafian acclimates to the world. Jarlaxle teams up. He gets down into the dirt. He's selflessly involved with everybody now. Even Enturi is selflessly involved with everybody now. It is a great story. Regis of the Companions of the Hall has an amazing storyline in Timeless and Boundless. That's great. Brunor is just in charge. He's the king of Gauntlegrim. He doesn't really do much anymore, but he's still a great character. Wolfgar is a great character. Gromf is getting some character development as well. Gromf chose a side, and in the climactic battle here, by choosing the side of his brother, and you get the feeling that Gromp is majorly a Sundare at this point. He is no longer a bad guy. He's not necessarily a good guy, but he is a Sundare to his brother. He's a Sundare to Catti-brie. He's a Sundare to Drizzt. He's a Sundare to the people that he now calls allies, because he refuses to admit to himself that he has friends now. He's a big softy. Gromp is amazing with that, and he has some good character development. He finally chooses a side between Loth and the heretics. He fully becomes a heretic. And that's when the amazing Way of the Drow trilogy happened. Now, this is the only paperback that I have. The next two here are hardbacks, so I can't necessarily hold them side by side. I don't have enough room here. So I'll just show them individually, one by one. So this is Starlight Enclave. And Drizzt is mostly absent from this story. Jarlaxle, Artemis Enturi, Zaknafian, and Catti-brie team up to go on an adventure, because Jarlaxle, as he's basically orchestrating this entire adventure, he has a bunch of hidden motives. His first motive is to go to the north to rescue Dumweel Armgoat. I intentionally left her name out, but she's been involved in the story for a long time, ever since the Hunter's Blades trilogy. She is the daughter of Tosin Armgoat, who was in the Hunter's Blades trilogy, who eventually joins the Moon Elves, who show up in the Hunter's Blades trilogy, and he marries one of them and has a daughter named Dumweel Armgoat. but the doom wheel gets corrupted by the sword of Khazad-dûm and slays her brother and flees with her father into Mensa Barenza, in a place where she doesn't like being at all. And so Grumph, being a grumpy bad guy at the time, instead of killing her, though, he just banishes her into the north. But I get the feeling, I'm starting to get the feeling that this might be a deital intervention. I'm thinking that Elistrea, Lolth's daughter, is starting to have a sort of impact, a sort of whatever going on. But I'm not going to fully review all of these stories just yet. But they go into the north, they do their thing, and they find the city of Khazad-dûm, which is a surface drow city of 50 to 60,000 drow, roughly the size of Mensa Barenza, if not larger. And they're all good guys. They are free from the Spider Queen of Lolth. They have left Lolth. They don't even know Lolth. And Elistrea has a small church here, and it's great. It's a great thing. And Jarlaxle gets tears in his eyes and says, "This is the place that he has dreamed of since he was a child. This is the one thing that he refused to give up on. It's what kept him going most of his life, hoping that there was something like this on the surface, hoping that Lolth was not the only thing for the drow." It's great. It's culminating and from the Crown Wars that existed like 15 to 20,000 years in the back of the past between the kingdoms of elves, which is basically a proxy war for the elven deities. It's basically a big family squabble. But it's like a rectification / continual of that proxy war happening up here. But first, they have to deal with Igorl, the Lord of Entropy. Oh my god! Now they're bringing in Demon Stone into the mix here. Demon Stone is a PS2 video game where you get to team up with Rannick, Shai, and Ilias to defeat Igorl, the Lord of Entropy, who gets revived. Calvin Blackstaff is the mentor of Ilias, who is a wizard apprentice to him. Rannick is a writer of Nesme and a veteran of the Hunter's Blades trilogy. And Jai is a brand new character that she just showed up in this book. She's a half drow, half elf, I think. And I guess she's like a stand-in for Dome Wheel type of archetype. Because the whole first two books of The Way of the Drow was dealing with like a half-drow type of character and how big of a impact that is, because Drizzt now has a daughter as of this trilogy who is half elf, half human, and that's a big deal in and of itself. And she is accepted by all of the surface races, and Jarlaxle wants to give Dome Wheel a chance to be accepted by everybody as well. And Grumpy Grumph, ooh, Grumpy Grumph. So at the end of Starlight Enclave, Jarlaxle and Truri, Catti-brie, and Zagnafian lead a team into Igorl's castle to rescue Domewheel Armgo, who has been captured there. And basically, it's a bad end. They find Igorl. They didn't even know he was there. And Igorl basically wipes the floor with everybody except for Jarlaxle, who escapes, because of course Jarlaxle escapes. And Jarlaxle goes into Khazad-dûm, and Khazad-dûm says, nobody can leave here unless we wipe your memories of Khazad-dûm, and you're not even going to remember that your friends have been lost. So, make your choice carefully. And Jarlaxle says, go ahead and do that. And he writes initials on the bottom of his foot to give him a clue once he loses his memories on what to do. And so Jarlaxle reunites with Camuriel. Camuriel teleports him back down to the Ivy Mansion, and Grumph, of course, shows up, and he's, Grumph. All right, there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on. So one of the drow from Khazad-dûm is teleported back to the Ivy Mansion because of Gwen Wyvar. We'll get into that character, the Panther of Drizzt, later. But she's teleported to the Ivy Mansion to save her from Igorl, and So everybody shows up to try to interrogate her, but this drow named Azadana refuses to give them any information because Galadea is very isolationist. They don't want anybody to know they exist, and she cannot betray that. She can't even tell them where their friends, Jarlaxle, Zakanavian, and Chori and Canterbury, are. They can't even tell them. She can't even tell them any of that because of her training and her oaths that she has taken. And so, Kimiriel tries to probe her mind. Grumpf immediately shows. The fact that Grumpf is here at all shows the depths of this guy's character development. Man, that's great. He actually shows up here immediately to interrogate her, to try to find his brother's location. And you can tell with his growing irritation and all of his lectures about how Jarlaxle should have done this, he should have done that, he wouldn't be in this predicament if he didn't do what he planned to do, I tried to talk him out of it, yada 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 yada. And for all of the bluster, you could tell that Grump is worried about his brother. You could tell that he is worried sick. He is a big Sundar softy. It is great. It is amazing. He's actually yelling with Brunor about how to find Jarlaxle and Canterbury and all that stuff. It is amazing. It is fantastic. Jarlaxle eventually gets found by Kimiriel. He has forgotten Caladay, he's forgotten Igorl's castle, he has forgotten everything. But they use the initials on his foot to decipher a code to take Jarlaxle to the Illithid hive mind, where they restore his memories, and with Jarlaxle, with his memories restored, gathers a team to raid Igorl's castle. He brings Drizzt, Wulfgar, Regis. He brings in Kimuriel. He brings in Grandmaster Kane. He brings Azudana. He brings in Pickle Boulder Shoulder. Pickle from the Cleric's Quintet. Pickle Boulder Shoulder. And then, most surprisingly of everybody, Grumpf Banray himself joins this team, alongside the twin dragon sisters from the Sellswords trilogy, Ilnazara and Tazbekela. Jarlaxle has gathered a veritable army to raid Igorl's castle to rescue Artemis and Churi Canterbury, Saknafian, Domweel, Armgo, and all the other Caladeans from Igorl's dungeons. And Grumpf battles Igora alongside Pickle, Boulder Shoulder, Kimiriel, Obladra, and Drizzt. And these four, alongside Grandmaster Kane, take on the Lord of Entropy in one of the biggest battles. It was amazing. Man, that was great. It was honestly great to see Grump's power on display. This dude is a one-man army. We finally get to see him actually do something to show off why everybody keeps saying he's one of the most powerful people on the entire continent. And it's true, this dude is... he wiped out Igorl's entire army, forcing Igorl to show up to take him out personally. That was great. Grump was the first person Igorl targeted. He just beelined to Grumpf. And Grumpf was just growling his way through everything and trying to give everything he had against Igorl. It was a very humbling experience for Grumpf, surely, to to remind him that for all of his bluster, for all of his power, he cannot defeat a god by himself. He just can't do it. So Pickle Boulder Shoulder was the MVP of this battle. It was amazing. It was great. And then we finally get into Lolth's Warrior, the latest story in the Salvatore Drizzt franchise. And Drizzt, Jarlaxle, Grumpf, Banray, everybody goes into the battle, the final battle in Menzoberranzan, the Civil War, to try to save it from Lolth, to liberate the Drow once and for all. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, otherwise I'll be here for another hour and a half. But I just want to say that Grumpf Banray was the MVP of this battle. Grumpf and Kimiriel were the MVPs. And it was amazing. Grumpf took out Lolth's avatar. a whole cadre of Yockalals, the entirety of House Valar and all of its priestesses. He took them all on by himself, and he wiped the floor with all of them. It was amazing. Do not underestimate this Archmage. This dude is powerful. But yeah, that I thought I'd just go into this series and just give a little introductory thing. I'm gonna make a little playlist series of R.A. Salvatore. I'm gonna make a few individual character studies videos. One about Grumph, one about Drizzt, Brunor, Wulfgar, Triri, Jarlaxle especially, Camuriel. I'm going to go into a lot of my favorite characters and my personal interpretations of these characters and how they've grown and how I think they've grown and what I think their alignments are and how they've impacted me and how this story is just a fantastic little thing. R.A. Salvatore, alongside Steven Erikson, Tolkien especially, and a couple other authors, were my biggest inspirations. This dude got me into writing. This dude got me into wanting to write. This dude got me into wanting to become an author myself. Seeing how his stories and how he works with characters over the setting itself, because he's just an author amongst many authors in this shared world, so the characters are what he focuses on. The characters are his characters, and it shows how much he cares about these characters and the growth and journeys that everybody has taken to get them to where they are as of Loth's Warrior is fantastic. I have a couple gripes here and there, but I can mostly just praise this series. I can mostly just praise this whole franchise. And I have nothing but love for this author and what they do. I have picked up a bunch of their Corona books, The Bear, the Dame, and all, the Highwayman, and all that stuff. I've got them all on hardback. I eventually want to get into the Demonstone Wars, or whatever the Devil War, what was it called? I can't remember the name. But he has a couple stories that he writes separate from Forgotten Realms that I plan to get into and read those as well. Look forward to more of these videos, though. R.A. Salvatore is somebody you want to read, but I have to give you caution. It's an hour and 12 minutes into this video to show off over 40 novels here, and it is very much This is the culmination of everything that has come before, much like the Ghost King was. This is the culmination of everything. It has elements from the very first novel, bringing into a close character journeys. So you have to start at the beginning and go all the way down to Loth's Warrior to truly appreciate what he has made here. This is ambitious as heck, and I have nothing but respect for it. It is probably my favorite franchise, my favorite writing, storyline, character group. Is my favorite franchise out of all of it. More than Lord of the Rings. More than the Halo universe. I have a bunch of Halo books. More than Malazan Book of the Fallen. More than the Pendergast series. I have a video about the Relic. I have most of the Pendergast books. This is my favorite series. It is. Out of all of them. Bar none. I hope I've sent that message across. Give it a read. Give it a read.